All right, lesson 2.0, operations with rational numbers. Your objectives for this lesson: students will be able to distribute in order to solve for a variable in an equation. And students will be able to, I spelled that wrong right there. That's okay. Perform math operations with fractions. Fractions are my friends. Let's get started. Okay, what is distribution? Write this down. The distributive property, you see it every time you have some letter, or some number, times another expression inside parentheses. And I'm just going to use all letters to illustrate my point here. So here, let's read it out. We're going to read this left to right. A times, parentheses, x minus c. Well, the distributive property means that this a is being multiplied to everything in here. Let's change this to a plus, okay? And so what we get is a times x is a times x. And then a times plus c is a times c. So this is kind of also how it works, right? I have two expressions that are equivalent. That means a is being multiplied times everything in there. And I can have numbers, variables. I can go on and on and on. A is just being multiplied once to everything inside the parentheses. I have a plus a times x plus a times y. All right? Let's see this in action with some sample problems. So we have some sample problems. The first one, make sure you write these down, by the way. 3 times, parentheses, x plus 2. If I'm going to distribute, it's going to be 3 times x, and then 3 times positive 2. So 3 times x is just 3 times x. 3 times positive 2 is 6. And we're done. We distributed. Here I have 2 times y minus 3. Let's distribute. 2 times y is 2 times y. Positive 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. And we're done distributing. Negative 4 times x plus 2. Negative 4 times positive x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times positive 2 is negative 8. And we're done distributing. And last but not least, negative 2 times x minus 3. I'm going to distribute the negative 2. And I'm going to get negative 2 times positive x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 3 is going to be positive 6. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. Operations with fractions. Please write this down. Will we add or subtract fractions? I'm going to have a, b, c, and d be real numbers. And b and d do not equal 0. Okay? So I'm going to use them to make fractions. A over b plus c over d. How do we add them together? Well, the denominators have to be the same. Right now I have b and I have d, so they don't have anything in common. So in order to make common denominators, I'm going to multiply this times d on the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to multiply this times b on the top and the bottom, right? Because I'm going to use a common denominator of d times b. And in order to get this denominator to be d times b, I need to multiply it by b. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Okay? So over here, we have a times d plus c times b. This is our new fractions, our answer. We'll see this in action with actual numbers in a moment. Multiplication is a little more straightforward. We're going to use the same numbers. A divided by b times c divided by d, or sometimes we'll see it in parentheses next to each other. When we multiply fractions, we go straight across. So I get a times c over b times d. Okay? I'm going to rewrite this in alphabetical order. Okay? And then when we have division, a over b divided by c over d, that's the same as a over b times, and I take this guy and I turn it upside down. So I write the reciprocal, d over c, and that equals a times d over b times c. So when you divide a fraction, and then sometimes it'll look like this, ab divided by c over d, we still write it a over b times, and then the reciprocal, d over c. So you see it's the same, and it gets us to the same answer. Time for some sample problems. So we have some work with fractions and distribution. So here I have 1/2 times x plus 4. So I distribute, I get 1/2 times x plus 4 times 1/2 is 4 over 2. I'm going to simplify this. I have x over 2 plus 2, and we're done. Here I have 1/3 times parentheses 6x minus 7. So I distribute, I have 1/3 times 6x minus 7, times 1/3. I'm writing this differently so you can see. That's 6x over 3 minus 7 over 3, because this is 7 over 1. I multiply straight across. A whole number can be written as a fraction with that whole number on the top and a 1 in the denominator. I can simplify 6x divided by 3. That gives me, that's a 2. 2x minus 7/3, and I'm done. Here I have negative 3 halves times parentheses 4x minus 5. So it's going to be negative 3 over 2 times 4x over 1 minus, plus negative times a negative is a positive. 3 over 2 times 5 over 1. Let's simplify. Factor out the 2. That becomes a 1. My apologies. And I get negative 6x plus 15 over 2. And I'm done. Because 4 divided over here, 4 divided by 2, that leaves 2 in the numerator. This 2 turns into a 1. That's how I get, that's how I get 6. I get negative 3 times 2. Last two sample problems, write these down. I have 1/2 times x over 3 plus 7/2. So I'm going to distribute 1/2 times 7 over 2. I'm going to simplify this. Remember, we multiply straight across. It gives me x over 6 plus, and we do this one, multiply straight across, 7 over 4. I am done. Negative 1/2 times 4/5 x minus 8/3. Negative 1/2 times 4x over 5. And negative times a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So that's 1/2 times 8/3. First, I'm going to combine those two, multiply straight across. That gives me negative 4x over 10. We do this one. 6. And we're done. All right, so to recap. Distribution. So we have a number on the outside of some parentheses. And this number is really being multiplied to both of these terms on the inside. 3 times x plus 3 times 3. So if you think about it, here's your x plus 3. And each of those is being multiplied 3 times. Fractions. We add or subtract. We need a common denominator. That's the number on the bottom of the fraction. When we multiply, we go straight across. So I get a over b times c over d is the same as a times c over b times d. When we divide, if I have a over b divided by c over d, that's the same as a over b times the reciprocal of c over d, which is d over c, which becomes, right, for multiplication, a times d over b times c. So for practice, you're going to do lesson 2.0 worksheet. Okay. You're also going to do the Desmos activity that's loaded in the Canvas class. All right. If you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me.